Hey, I'm Jen, and cancer sucks. Cancer is this weird, crazy thing that everybody knows what it is, and everybody knows it's shitty, and people know cancer, and you know you treat it with surgery, or chemo, or radiation, or some combination thereof, and it either works or it doesn't. And that's kind of the end of what most people know about it, because it's like a dirty word. No one wants to talk about it. It's a crappy thing. You don't want to bring people down by asking questions and all that kind of stuff. And if you don't have a frame of reference for it, you can't just go and educate yourself. And really, why should you? What more do you need to know about it? And I get it. So, and I was kind of in the same boat too. So when I got my diagnosis, I was like, no, I'm not going to let it be a dirty word. I'm not going to let it be this unknown thing that I don't want to talk about or that people can't talk to me about or anything like that. It's like, I'm going to use this as an educational kind of thing, partially for me and partially for other people, and partially because I just was like, I need to do something with this. So maybe it's selfish. I don't know. Well, we're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna talk about the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle from start to finish. Finish. That's in air quotes, because the cancer is always never done. Yay! There's lesson number 1. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, which, as far as cancers go, is not the worst thing that you can be diagnosed with, but it's still not great. It was found kind of on accident, so I'm gonna momentarily get on my soapbox here and be ladies, please, I know it is not pleasant, but you need to keep up on your Pap tests. Even though I'm calling it a Pap, and they still call it a Pap. It's not technically actually a Pap anymore, but you get the idea of it. And gentlemen, if you have women in your lives, please encourage them to go and get their regular testing. I think now they recommend you do it every 3 years unless you've had an abnormal result. Do it. Please do it. If you are sexually active at any age, you should be starting to do it. Or once you get into the 18 to 20 range, you should be doing it anyways. Just because sometimes your body just hates you, even if you haven't done anything, because everyone's on and on about how HPV is the leading cause of cervical cancer, and so you need to get that vaccine, and you get HPV from having sex, and blah blah blah, and that's not the only reason you could end up with this cancer. Just because you're not sleeping with anybody doesn't mean you're off the hook. Please go and do it, okay? I know it's an uncomfortable experience, but it's more uncomfortable to catch a cancer late. So please do it. So with me, I was doing my regular testing like I was supposed to, and I got an abnormal result at one point. And an abnormal result doesn't mean it's cancer, it just means that something happened with the test, that it thinks there's abnormal things. And you can end up with false positives. Sometimes your cells are just abnormal. I'm weird everywhere else, why not there too? So if you ever get an abnormal result, don't panic. It's more than likely fine. So what they had me do is we did the test, it came back abnormal, and they grade it, based on its level of abnormality. And I was kind of at the lowest grade. And they're like, that's actually pretty common. They're like, since you've been clean up until this point, anything that could show up there grows rather slowly. So they're like, oh, well, rather than doing it every 3 years, we'll just test you again in a year and see what happens. And when we got to the 1 year point, we did the test, and it came back abnormal again. And this time, it was a grade up. And they're like, okay, well, something's going on here. So we need to do more testing. And so what they do at that point is they do something called a colposcopy. And if you thought PAPs were uncomfortable, welcome to a new level. What they will do is, rather than just getting up in your business with their little car jack tool and scraping away in there, is they will get all up in your business literally with a microscope. They put a microscope right in there, and the doctor's face goes right in there, and they inspect your cervix, looking for the same stuff you would look for skin cancer, looking for discolorations that have uneven edges and just stuff like that. And they'll look for those things, and if they find anything weird, they'll take a biopsy of that area. Not just the scraping, full on biopsy. Super unpleasant. So I did the colposcopy, and they look around in there, and they go, everything looks completely fine. They're like, it's probably okay. They're like, come back in 6 months, we'll do another PAP. And we did another PAP at 6 months, and it came back abnormal, and now it is another grade up. It is now on the 3rd level, and they're like, all right, something is happening here. We gotta look at this. So we go in, and they do a second colposcopy, and they look in, they go, everything still looks normal, but something is obviously causing your test to come back positive, so we're just going to take biopsies randomly. And it wasn't like random, there was a system to it, so they knew where things had come from in case any of the results came back as like a thing. And they took 5 biopsies, 4 from kind of like the outside surface area, and then they got super personal and went inside the cervix, and whoa, that one was special. And they took a 5th one there, and the 4 they took on the outside all came back as stage 1. And the one that they took on the inside came back as precancerous. So the PAP and all that stuff and the colposcopy and everything is just looking on that outside surface, and everything that I had that was starting to go was happening below the surface. So that's why a scraping would bring back some abnormal cells, is because they just barely get into that surface. But it's not anything that anybody could ever see. So I'm glad I had a doctor that was like, no, something's effed up, and just was like, we're gonna take things. So I got that call. It was right after I had gotten home from RTX. It was like I went in for that test literally 8 hours after I got back from RTX that year. What was that, 2014? And I was getting ready. I was at work, and I was getting ready to go into a meeting, and I got called at 9 a.m. in the morning. They're like, BTW, you have cancer. They were nicer about it than that, but that's what it felt like, because I had to hang up and then go to my fucking meeting. And then I just sat and cried in my cubicle for a little bit. Just because, like, stage 1 is early. Precancerous is obviously early. Stage 1 is still early, but it's still, when somebody calls you and says you have cancer, because it's that dreaded, dirty word, it's just a punch in the gut, and it sucks. So after that call, I got referred to a gynecological oncologist. I lucked out that I happen to apparently live near one of the 2 facilities that one of the top 5 gynecological oncologists in the country spends half her time at. She spends half her time at an institute in California and half her time here in Michigan. I don't know why. So she ended up as my oncologist originally. So, like, that's awesome. She's super knowledgeable, has been doing tons of crazy research and all of that. So, it sucks walking into a cancer center when you're as young as I am, because everyone looks at you like, oh, are you visiting somebody? And you're like, no, I'm here for me. And they're like, oh, but Dawn, you're so young. I'm like, yes, I know, thank you. Like, this is already shitty enough. I don't need you reminding me, but thanks for that. But all the staff was super nice, and we kind of went over everything. And when you find cervical cancer that is precancerous or is stage 1, something very early, there's a procedure they prefer to be able to do, and if they can't, then they'll go to the one I ended up having. So if you're fortunate and everything's low grade, and it's just like, oh, well, we gotta just deal with this and it'll be fine, they'll do something called a LEEP. It's LEEP, and it's, what is it? I had it up. It's laser electro... I'll put it down there. But essentially they take a loop of wire and heat it, and it just use that to just burn away the offending tissue. And that's it. You take some painkillers and you're good to go. It's something that's super, super easy. It's like, it's not the most pleasant thing. I mean, those parts aren't used to being touched anyways, much less burned away. So it's not like getting butterfly kisses, but you do that and then it's done. And they might have to go back and do like a second round at some point to make sure they got everything, and then you continue on with your merry way. In my case, because we couldn't see anything, it wasn't on the surface, it was kind of on the next layer down, and we knew where the spots were we had biopsied, but because we found them on accident, we were like, okay, well, there could be more that we just don't know about. So we did something called a conization, which pretty much, it's, if you think about it, you can probably figure it out, is they essentially just cut away a cone shape. So it got like the entire surface and then just went back into the cervix a bit. To try to get everything. And a skilled surgeon can get that all out in like one piece, which is the best way to be able to like tested appropriately, and my chick was on point, and it all came out as one nice little cone of grossness. I try not to think about that too much. It's kind of weird. So I did that surgery very shortly after my first meeting with her. So it was outpatient, which was nice, but it was still like go in to the hospital, get full on knocked out. Had to sit on a really weird table in the OR before I got knocked out, so that way they could get up in there. When I woke up, apparently, the nurse asked me what my name was. It's like, oh, I'm Jen so-and-so. And she was like, okay, cool. So you're awake for, she's awake, you're awake for real this time. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean for real this time? And apparently I've woken up twice before, and the first time when she asked me what my name was, I had just finished playing Mass Effect, like the whole trilogy. So apparently I woke up and I said, I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite hospital bed on the Citadel, and then I fell back asleep. And then the second time I woke up, she asked me what my name was, and I was like, I'm Princess Zelda, bitch, and then I fell asleep again. So that was pretty great. So yeah, and then apparently on the way home while I was still on drugs, I had been hooked on the Starbomb album, and what I remember was that the album was playing and I was singing along with it on the way home. What apparently actually happened is that it was completely silent in the car and the music I was hearing was in my head, so I was just singing to nothing. My husband got a kick out of that. He would have recorded it if he hadn't been driving my drugged ass home. Anyway, so that all happened. Not the most pleasant thing, but I was like up and moving around again pretty shortly, and they were like, okay, well, you recover, and then we're going to test this piece of tissue we got out to see, like, make sure we got everything that we think we know of. So when people are talking about surgery and cancer, you hear them talk about margins, negative margins and positive margins. And what that means is like when they go and cut something out of you, is the margin is that entire surface that they cut. And a negative margin means it is clean, normal tissue where they cut. And which is good. That's what you want. You want negative margins. If you have a positive margin, what that means is that they found cancerous tissues on that cut surface. And then, I mean, you can think of anything that you would cut through. If you cut through something, it's going to be on both sides. So the idea is that if you have a positive margin, it's really probably not very likely that they happen to cut right at the border of what it was. And it's a strong indicator that there's probably still cancer left at the site. So you want negative margins. So I had negative margins, which was great. We had that conversation. I went in like a week after the surgery, and so they could check everything, make sure it was all healing fine. And they're like, all right, well, we got the results. And they're like, good news, your margins were negative. Bad news. There was bad news. So what they do is they also, not only are they checking margins, but they're checking for cancer types. And so there was the type we had originally detected that caused all of this. And I honestly don't remember what it's called because ultimately it didn't end up mattering. But it was something where it's like, this is really common, not a big deal, like, we'll cut it out. And it's something that's like, it's very localized. They also found something called adenocarcinoma in situ. In situ meaning in progress. It's technically precancerous, but adenocarcinomas are bad news. They are bad. And so if somebody says that, even in situ, you got a little bit of a situation. Cervical adenocarcinoma is a glandular condition. It is aggressive and it is invasive. It can spread relatively easily. And you don't want that. You don't want spreading cancer. And the standard treatment, when that is detected in somebody, is a hysterectomy, which if you're, you need to brush up on your medical terms. Hysterectomy is removal of your reproductive organs. It's that scary, it's that serious of a thing that they're like, nope, everything's got to go out now, like GTFO. That's really the only way to protect yourself from it. Because it is also multifocal, which means that we found a cancer growth center, we found a foci for it, and it's highly likely that was not the only one. So it could be anywhere all up in my business, and we'd have no way of knowing. And we didn't do the hysterectomy right away because the other fun thing about this adenocarcinoma in situ, or AIS, is that the average age of women that it is found in is 40. I think it's technically 39.6 years of age, and I was 27 at the time. And spoiler, if you get your uterus taken out, you can't have kids anymore. And so doctors are really hesitant to pull that sucker out when you're at ripe childbearing age and you're freshly married and like all of those things. So despite the fact that it is invasive, they were like, okay, we don't really want to do this right now. You will have to do it eventually. But for right now, you had it in the precancerous stage. And despite the fact that it is invasive, it grows slowly. So the plan was that for the next 6 months, or not the next 6 months, words are hard, for the next couple of years, every 6 months, I would go back in and we would do testing to see if we could detect anything. So this was something where it was it wasn't just doing a pap anymore. It's like we actually were taking biopsies on a regular basis. So super fun and great. Loved it. And did that every 6 months. And it was really nerve-wracking because it's something where a negative result isn't truly negative. A positive result would be positive, but negative just means we didn't find anything. It doesn't mean nothing's there. So it was always good news, but there was always like this shadow kind of behind it of like, it's coming for you. So at my last 6-month test, that was going to put me at the 2-year mark of being in remission, which is an awesome milestone to hit. We did the testing, but my oncologist brought back up the topic of the hysterectomy because it is something that will need to be done at some point. Because we're essentially just gambling at this point. And we had the discussion where the longer that I wait to do this, my odds that there is cancer somewhere that we're not detecting increases. And she wanted me to be absolutely sure that I was done using those parts. So like if we were going to have kids, keep everything. Obviously this is not something you can undo and all of that. But we had a really frank discussion about it. Right now I hang out between like 20 and 30% of a chance that there's something brewing inside. And I'm not a gambler. I went to Vegas once and I turned $2 into $20 and I stopped. I'm not a gambler. And so when you're telling me that there's a 1 in 3 chance that I have an invasive cancer that is starting to fuck my shit up, I'm like, no, I'm cashing out. We're done. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's nerve-wracking. And I don't want to be 36 and have them go, we just found stage 3 cancer in your kidneys that migrated. Like, I don't want that to happen. So I'm like 20 to 30. I'm like, that's too high for me. So we're doing the hysterectomy. Yeah, we're gonna do that. So that's coming up it is less than a month now. I think it's like 3.5 weeks at the time of this recording. And like I said, I want to turn this into an educational thing. And part of it is for me too. Part of cancer's scary. It's scary. And for me, some of the fear is rooted in the unknown. So if I can take that away, if I can make it known, if I can talk about it, they kind of take some of the power of that fear away. So that's why I'm doing these videos. So what I would ask you guys to do is, if you've got questions, if you have questions of any kind, I don't care if you think it's too personal or it's too depressing or any of that. Like, if you have questions that you've thought about asking somebody who's dealing with it and you're like, I can't do that, I want you to ask. And if you don't want to leave it as a comment, send it to me in a private message on Twitter or on Rooster Teeth, or send me an email or something. Like, I'm going to leave all these anonymous, but I want I want this to be an opportunity for an open discussion about stuff. So, like, I'm not going to show you guys pictures of my lady parts, but I will get as close to that as I'm comfortable sharing things, because I want this to be an open book, whether it's just for your own curiosity, whether it's because somebody you know has gone through something like this, whether you have your own concerns about stuff, whether you're a lady who's like needs to know all the reasons why you need to keep up on your pap testing. But yeah, let me know, and I'm gonna chronicle everything that's coming up for the next couple of weeks, including surgery day, including recovery, and all that stuff. So strap in, folks. It's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a thing. They're gonna cut out parts of me. That's weird. It's really weird. I wonder if I can keep any of it. It'd be a hell of a mantelpiece.